Welcome, welcome, welcome live from Kyiv. It is Wednesday night, and we're going to have a good conversation here with our wonderful friend. And I hope that you are excited for this because I think Juliet Jeske does a fantastic job of something I've done before. I stopped doing it for sanity purposes, and that's monitoring Fox News. And there's actually some other things that she did in the background that are very similar to what I did also, like monitoring the Proud Boys rhetoric. And we'll go into that. We'll wait till she comes in. But thank you for joining, and thank you. Good to see you, Beth. Welcome from Ohio. A wonderful state. I haven't been there in a while. Actually, I used to pass through there. There was a few events here and there. It would happen in Columbus. I got friends there and friends in Kettering. And I see Ann and Jennifer here. Other people will sign in. And I saw that, Beth. Thank you very much. And thank you for it because it helps get work done. The more I'm doing work and writing articles and filming and cutting, is less I'm going, where's the money? Because independent journalism is it's a bit of a risk. I turned down an editor job that would have put not the most amount of money in a bank account. In fact, it's below minimum wage American, but it's pretty good for Ukrainians. And I said, give that to a 25 to 30-year-old. I'm a published author on terrorism, and I got a lot of polymath skills. I need to go wing it. And then I launched this, and we have had a great set of progress. In fact, let me go over that a little bit. And thank you, Lynn and Paul, for being here. And Beth gets to be partially on this completion of awesomeness by hold on. See if we can get the screen to behave. No, not the Daily Beast. The Chris Sampson. Get the right page up. Thank you. Um, let's see. What's the dashboard say? I'm going to watch these numbers. And the reason why I'll talk about why we're watching these numbers in a moment. And it has a lot to do with the adversaries, the crazy people like Michael Flynn. So 628 total subscribers, 45 paid subscribers. And I remember we were stuck at 30 non-paid subscribers. And I went, don't panic. Chill. Get on the air. Keep doing your work. It will happen. I'm not worried about it. Just keep in there. It goes. Also, I found in there's a toggling thing that's like upward mobility in news wing department, and I am at like 42. I'm sorry. Let me correct myself how I actually internalize it. We are at 42, 47, something like that, which is really good because we are really working our way through. And I've said before, this is a group thing. We really had a great conversation with a friend earlier today about how I feel about Substack. And one of the things I said was that there are people who want to learn at a higher level than the media is offering them, and that the platforms are offering them. And if we do more about it, and we provide the information supply line and the quality information that you want, then voila, you get to get what you want out of it. Like tonight, I mean, I'm very impressed to see that Timothy Snyder and Ruth were able to pull in like 4,000 viewers in no time. Why? We want to know what they have to say, right? I am no Timothy Snyder yet, but I'm working on it. I studied my Ukrainian history. I pay attention to the best. One of the best ways to get to be the best, if I have any idea how to be a master, is to emulate what the masters do. Speaking of which, unrelated to the news in Ukraine, unrelated to tonight's topic, I got to spend an hour today interviewing a fantastic music master from South India. I've known his music my whole life, and we've texted for a while. He's been my Facebook friend for a while, but we didn't get to do our interview till today. The great Al Shankar, who played with Miles Davis, Frank Zappa, Phil Collins, Peter Gabriel. He's on the Passion soundtrack, the Last Temptation of Christ soundtrack. He's all sorts of things he did. And we had the same conversation about this. We were talking about that there are people who, if you give them the inroads to know things, they will try to learn things. And if you, I don't believe in dumbing down, but I also don't believe in doing like a superficial read of that. And I think that is really what our viewers want. which is exactly what brings us this wonderful conversation tonight. And Juliet, first off, uh, big compliments to what you do. I know a little bit about how brain numbing it can be. I even sent you the photos of the videotape series I mentioned last night to everyone, that I have 2,500 video cassettes before I went digital, monitoring the crazies.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a lot. It takes a certain distance and patience. But how are you doing tonight? How are things?
Can you hear me okay? Because I just set this up.
I hear you fine.
Oh,
I think our
great,
audio is
great,
good.
great,
Yeah,
great. And I can keep my iPods down here. That's great. I'm not
exactly.
I'm not used to using my phone. So, and my cat, I have two very active cats named Odin and Thor, and they tend to get
That's
very
what
like
they're worth.
into things. It's telling me to put a filter on. I'm not putting a filter on. Leave me alone. I'm like, no filter. I was born in the 70s. I'm perfectly okay with that.
Yeah,
And aging and
yeah.
all that. I don't care. So
I'm
it's
naturally this color, so I wake up every
fabulous.
day this color.
Fabulous. It's oh, there it is. I finally got rid of it. Great. Okay.
There you go.
Yes, everything's good here. It's been a rough couple weeks. Uh
Indeed.
last week was rough because the State of the Union, I normally pick up a lot of extra hours
Hmm.
um, that I wouldn't normally cover to give my reader listeners like the full spectrum of how Fox News reacted to something. And then
Right,
what
right,
what happened was I was still behind schedule, but I was like, "We'll be okay. We got the weekend coming up." And then Friday night hit, and I didn't sleep at all because I couldn't sleep because I was too freaked out by the war. And then I kind of stayed up to catch up with four new hours of Fox and Friends weekend. They had, interestingly enough, and I think this is a nice detail, they had the regular cast on Saturday.
hmm
Now, that show starts at 6 a.m., and a
hmm
couple of them live pretty far away from the studio. The war started around 3 a.m., our Eastern Standard Time. So the chances of them getting these people, calling them up, get to the studio in time, because they have to get there early, seems kind of slim. And I kind of suspect that Fox may have had a heads up because it seemed a little suspicious that the regular crew was there, not the weekend cast, with very little
right.
notice. And they didn't mention it. They're just like, oh, hi, we're back. And I thought, that's weird. Like, nobody said, oh, we got a call in the middle of
So,
the night.
so is that our basically our third Don Grandmaster bullshit artist?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It was very odd. I
You
thought,
can't have the B teams. You can't have the blue belts in when you need the black belts in. Yeah.
well, I think it basically boiled down to they didn't like the weekend cast includes Rachel Campos Duffy, who's
Oh,
married
yeah.
to Sean Duffy, and she used to be like an MTV star, and
Hmm.
she's kind of dim. So I think they didn't want her asking stupid questions because that's what she tends to do with these situations. So they had Ansley Einhart, Brian Kilmeade, and Lawrence Jones, the regular cast. And Brian
Right.
Kilmeade also has a lot of I don't want to say expertise, but he, at least like knows more about uh Ukraine and Iran, and just he's more into, I've joked for years that he should start his own show called Let's Go to War with Brian Kilmeade because
Right.
he's very much a hawk about everything. So I think that's why they wanted the original cast. And then on Sunday they went ahead and went with the weekend cast, and like I predicted, Rachel Campos Duffy was like, "So, where are these Muslims that agree? The Shia Muslims that agree with the Iranian? Where are they in the Middle East?" Just asking kind of dippy questions, and they're trying to explain to her that, like, well, they're scattered all over the Middle East, and you know, so that was funny. But it's been very very dark watching. Oh, sorry, there goes my phone. My apologies. I have to keep a whole
That's
hand
okay.
on it. Um, it's a cat issue. One of my cats jumped off my
That's what
desk.
they made them for.
That's exactly. But
That's what I use them on Instagram to see the cat that runs across everything, knocks everything over, takes over the whole cabinet, knocks out the TV, and interrupts the broadcast.
yeah, I have a little tuxedo cat named Thor who's who's I'm hell bent on destruction. That's all I got to say about that. But he's a wonderful animal, but he's completely insane. But yeah, it's sort of this idea of watching them spin this war that they don't really know how to spin, because 8 months ago they were telling everybody, we knocked out their nuclear capacity, we
Right.
obliterated it, and now all of a sudden they're like, they were a threat. And I'm like, what? And I also suspect that this war is not popular with MAGA, even though they keep claiming it is. I think some of the devoted would follow, Trump right off a cliff, but there's a lot of people who believed him when he said no new wars and I'm not going to start another never-ending war in the Middle East, and gas prices like immediately went up, and all the things that are negative about this have happened. So I just, we've just only just begun. I mean, we've only just begun.
That's right.
And Americans can't help but think of like Afghanistan, which turned into a 20-year quagmire, or Iraq,
That's
which
right.
was popular at first with some Americans. I was never a fan, but some Americans, and then quickly became incredibly unpopular. And people just wanted our people back, and they wanted them out of the Middle East. So I know a few people who are in like my circle. My sister was telling me people that we both know from high school and such that are MAGA, who are now they've lost it. They've turned on Trump completely because of this, because of the war.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, interesting enough, and I'm going to spare the audience my Alex Jones impression because I don't have my friend Spaghetti Kozak here to riff back and forth in Ukrainian and Alex Jones. But listening to that clip that was running around in the last 24 hours of him and the Rugrat, what's his name? Nick Fuentes.
Oh yes.
And how they're just so done and they're so broken. Now I'm a realist, and I wasn't a realist, but now I'm a realist. And my only thought is like, you got to find someone to spin the grift. You got to keep. Now, what do you do with the grift? The grift is got to morph, and it will. It always has. And he started the grift with Bohemian Grove, and he's still doing it. So nothing's going to change.
Well, I noticed too what was interesting about the State of the Union address is I could
Hmm.
tell they didn't think it was that great, because immediately after they had Sean Hannity did like a full hour on what he thought the State of the Union address was. And he talked about Democrats the whole time. He said, oh, the Democrats didn't stand, and they didn't applaud, and they didn't react, and those Democrats are
Right,
crazy and
right.
evil. And I thought, why are you talking about Democrats? And then the next day on the shows that I watched again, I saw similar themes. There's a lot of those Democrats, those horrible Democrats. And I thought, if that speech was so phenomenal, wouldn't you be talking about the speech? But you're talking about
Right, right,
Democrats,
right.
Like that to me is a sign. There's almost because I've been doing this for 4 years now, and I watch anywhere from 15 to 35, sometimes 40 hours. This past week, it's probably going to be way up there. I haven't even counted it yet, but
Right, right.
of Fox News, usually around 20.
Yeah,
And so I have figured them out, like their trends, their patterns. And when they have a lot of segments about, well, that Democrat said that, and they'll do
hmm,
like 9 minutes ripping on a Democrat or the Democratic Party in general, and they find new ways to come up with, I call the theme Democrats are terrible,
hmm.
because it's just insert the different politician, it doesn't matter. And so they'll have sometimes, like right after the State of the Union, I'm looking at my spreadsheet because I keep a spreadsheet for everything I cover on
Mm,
Fox.
okay.
I've every single minute is tallied,
Wow.
and I'll do it by segment. And sometimes segments get broken up, that sort of thing.
Right,
And
right.
when I look at my spreadsheet and every other category is Democrats are terrible, and then I have like a subcategory of who they were mainly talking about, that sort of thing. And I go,
Mm,
well, yeah, things must not be going great for Trump, because whenever they're talking about
right.
Democrats, they're just trying to distract. They're very once you figure out how they spin things, it gets very obvious of how to kind of figure them out. And
There's a
so
bit
like
of a bullshit algorithm to them, yeah, that's predictable. And we'll come to a couple of features in it real quick, but I'll tell my all of our viewers that are here, thank you for being here. I see some of them are saying they haven't seen you, they've heard you. I can relate to that because
yeah,
I
I'm
hear
very
you a lot.
rarely in my videos.
Right, right, right.
Just hard
And
to
one of the
be in
reasons
them.
Well, one of the reasons why I like this way of going with Substack is that I want to um, conquer the problem we have with the corporate media, like under Jeff Bezos throwing out the journalists, to say I see some bright line over here where the experts that got dismissed by those networks because they couldn't profit on them anymore have now been able to talk directly to the viewers. And yet, Michael Flynn has popped over here. So we have sort of a dual mission of promoting the information people need to see, relating them a little closer to the voices who do the work, and then also gaining a footing here that will confront those folks. And I've done a lot of the work like you do. I did it differently and also in a different area. I would chop up the A block, B block, C block, etc., to make sure that I could see where CNN, Fox, and MSNBC used their time from 8 o'clock in the morning till midnight every day. And you eventually, like you said, you see patterns of how they run their bullshit algorithm. And I'll say all three of them do differently, but Fox leads the bullshit fest at a way that the others follow. I think that that's why it's so important what you do. So let me ask you this way. There's always a cast of characters they have to play, right? Meaning in the Democratic Party, the antagonist they had to invoke, AOC, Hillary, whoever it is. How have you seen that change now that we've had in the last, especially the last week or so with the war? Is it just generic Democrats, or is there someone in particular that they have to go after that is now today's, whipping boy or whipping girl?
Right now, because the focus has been sort of nebulous, it's just all Democrats. Anyone who said anything negative about the war, anything critical about the war, they're like demonizing. So it's not really one person right now. And I find myself talking to my computer when they do this, and I just think, oh, they're not praising your glorious leader. They
Hmm.
get angry even on just mild criticism. Like, to them, mild criticism is, like, absolutely unacceptable.
Right.
Like, "How dare you, say we need to have a hearing about this and talk about this, and that he doesn't have the right to do this, and how dare you? You're being
Hmm.
disrespectful to our troops." They, like, go completely over the top on just incredibly mild, like, "Hey, maybe we shouldn't be doing this."
Right.
So that's something that they've been doing. It's just generally everybody. They've also tried to exploit a little bit the primaries that were last night, which really didn't go great for them, because if you look at the numbers for South Carolina, that was devastating, because they have separate primaries, of course, Democrat, Republican, and
Hmm.
far more people came out for the Democratic primary than the Republican primary. And that is a state that currently has 2 Republican senators. And I
Hmm.
believe it's the former governor is running for Senate. He's very popular, and he got a much larger, he won his primary with 92% of the vote
Hmm.
and got around 200,000 more votes than the Republicans, all the Republicans
Uh-oh.
combined. So
Uh-oh.
that's devastating. And they are ignoring that. And they're just like, ha ha ha, Jasmine Crockett didn't win her primary. But then when you look at the numbers from Texas, an even number, almost perfectly down the middle, with Democrats leading slightly, amount of people came out in the Democratic and Republican primaries. So slightly more Democrats showed up for the primaries than Republicans, and that's in Texas, so very, very red state.
Right.
So that's
Which is,
also
by the way, for the
bellwether.
viewers, that's where I'm from. I'm in Kyiv. I've been living in Ukraine for 4 years. Someone asked me if I was at Moe's. No, I'm 25 floors up near the Dnipro River in Kyiv with 1,423 days of war under my belt, watching America destroy
Wow.
itself in the same way it has been doing. But it's in hyperactive mode. And just for the viewers who might not know me, is I worked in counterterrorism as a civilian for a long time, but my specialty is news. I worked at Pacifica Radio and KPFT News, and then I was the guy who could fetch all the sound clips of Rumsfeld and Condi Rice and whoever else was doing that. I had an editing studio, so before we had a studio at the station for the news, it was mixed at my place. And I haven't stopped that. And I have a digital archive that would kill most people trying to even touch it, of all of these types of things that you talk about. So I've done what you do, which is why I'm glad you're doing it, because I haven't had time. And you're
Yeah,
doing an incredible time. You're doing an incredible job, and you totally have it down. And these characters need to be broken apart for our friends who work all day, and then need to come home and have a quick distillation like the Cliff Notes, or in this case, it's the Decoding Fox News Notes.
Yeah, I occasionally get lately it's been very strange. The past 2 weeks, I've gotten random accounts who will somebody will watch something I post on Substack, and then they yell at me, like, "That
Hmm.
didn't I wasted 2 minutes of my life watching that Fox clip, and I learned nothing. I don't
Right.
care."
That's the point.
"You don't have to follow me. It's all good." I'm like, because my thing is you have to kinda know your enemy, and when you've
Right.
got this propaganda machine that's wildly popular, which is Fox News, churning out false information all day long, manipulating its audience, twisting them into knots with fear, paranoia, because they use fear a lot. That's like their weapon, their tool of choice. And then if you don't know what's going on and you've got relatives, friends, loved ones, coworkers who are completely hooked into this propaganda
Right.
machine and they're spewing this stuff at you, if you just consume a little bit of what I'm putting out, then you kind of understand those people better and you know what they're telling you 100% is phony baloney. But like that's why I was asked to cover Fox by Jeff Jarvis, who's the, founder of Entertainment Weekly. He was a professor
Hmm.
at my graduate program. Um, but I had been covering right-wing media, which is why he thought of me, and my
Both of
so
us have a specialty in Proud Boys, but you did it
Yeah.
differently, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't know who the Proud Boys were because they didn't exist. It's a long
Right.
story. I knew someone who will remain nameless and genderless,
Hmm.
but I knew a performer in New York who went on I didn't know this person very well. My friends knew this person well,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I had background in video, and so they kind of recruited me. "Can you keep an eye on this human being that's going on this
Right. Right.
show
Right.
called The Gavin McInnes Show?" I said, "Sure," and I started collecting episodes of The Gavin McInnes Show, and before I knew it, I was at 250 at one point, episodes that I'd picked apart and cut up and found really incriminating clips and was sending them
That's right.
I sent them to the FBI. FBI didn't do anything with it as far as I know. I also learned later the FBI was already investigating them by the time I contacted them, which was interesting. Um, I got threats. I had NYPD, anti-terrorism task force cops in my apartment. That's a whole other story that's too long to tell because I'd sent a tip in about them and they thought I was affiliated with them basically. And that was the
Oh.
same day. It was the same day as the pipe bomb from Florida. It's such a crazy
Oh,
story.
Caesar Sayak. I covered that
Yeah.
case as the counterterrorism guy. That was 2 blocks from my house.
Yeah, that
The auto zone when they arrested him. I got a call from CTV in Canada. Can you cover the mail bomber? I said, oh yeah. Where are we at? Oh, they called him. Yeah, where they catch him? Auto zone on this address. That's 2 kilometers from my house. Hold on. Yeah,
yeah,
what
yeah,
time do you
yeah.
need me?
Yeah, I just happened to what had happened was it was right after the Proud Boys beat some people up, some counter protesters outside of the
That's
Metropolitan
right.
Republican Club. And all these people were calling for if you know anything about the Proud Boys, send stuff in. And I
Hmm.
didn't want any press and I was anonymous at the time, so I had sent something in
Ah, okay.
and actually talked to the FBI and they said, Here's what you do. Put the to address as a return address. Just do
Right.
that." And they said
Right.
that way, that happens. People do that all the time. And I said, "Okay." And I went to the post office, paid for everything with a debit card. So it wasn't really hiding. You could
Right.
find me. And then I mailed the governor and a bunch of other people this tiny little thumb drive that had a
Mm.
short video on it because that's what I could afford to send them. Something was short. They sent it to a bunch of people, and it just happened to show up in their mail system the same day as the pipe bombs. Now, this was a flat, padded envelope that weighed 2 ounces.
Hmm.
Flat. But because of the address and because of the paranoia, they flipped out, and they told me later that they sent, like, 1,000 cops to the governor's office, and a bomb squad and everything, and they quickly realized, "Oh, this is a thumb drive that has stuff about the Proud Boys," and a researcher sent it, and I called them because I was tipped off that they had it, and I called them and said, "Oh, here this is who I am, I'm just gonna clarify what this is." "No problem." I thought it was over, and they showed up at my tiny, tiny apartment that
Wow.
night. Yeah, they knock on my door, and I cannot make this detail up. I was making raw cat food at the time, so I had
Okay.
bones and blood, and I'm a vegetarian, which is even funnier. But I was making raw cat food at the time with a meat grinder. It's a long story, and I literally was like, "Let me put the meat away because there's blood all." It was chicken, but it was like, I cannot believe this is my life. And they came in and they didn't really interrogate me because I knew I wasn't part of the group. But the weirdest thing they asked me, because I had 4 detectives from the NYPD Anti-Terrorism Task Force in my
Mhm.
apartment, like questioning me about this. And they were like, "So, were you dating one of the Proud Boys?" And I'm like, "Hell no. Why would you ask me that? I'm a researcher. I was an amateur researcher." And then I
Sure.
realized there's a bunch of people who do this type of work for no pay, anonymously, just because they hate this
Yeah.
movement. And but yeah, that was completely terrifying. I bit through a lot, but I now have all 407 episodes of the Gavin McInnes Show on a hard drive,
Wow.
locked in a safe in my apartment. I'm not kidding. It's locked in a
No,
safe.
I can understand.
Now, at this point, I mean, I
Somewhere
don't
here,
think.
I have a hard drive here that's got a lot of their footage. I have a whole catalog of their stuff. So I was in Fort Lauderdale for 3 years. I'm from Texas, and I moved out of Texas after Hurricane Harvey. And I always thought Texas had the cornered market on crazy because of David Koresh and some strychnine drinking pastors and played with rattlesnakes. And then Florida said, "Really? Yeah, let's show how it is when there's iguanas." And Roger Stone actually was right around the corner from us and walked. I ran into him at the Riverside. But I watched those guys emerge out of a car after a protest on it had been like the 9th of November 2018 after the midterms. And they waited until the crowd of about 50 protesters saying released the Mueller report dispersed to about 5. And I was there, my girlfriend, and about 3 other people. And then they all come out, "Where's David Hogg?" And, Trump's your president, waving the Trump flag. And they waited till the police officers left. But what they didn't catch is there was immediately film of them being on the corner, so all 5 were quickly identified because I'm good at what I do. I have a team that does really good wicked work. And then they reappeared on the Saturday 2 days later with a whole bunch of protesters try at the Brenda Snipe recount at the Broward County Election Center. And I went out there with a 300 mil and took photos of every single one of them. 3 percenters. Matt Gaetz showed up. Ali Alexander was there. Laura Loomer was there. Michael the Black Man was there. Michael Simonetti. And we basically just took a recon of everyone there. Came back the following Monday. Had one of them get up in my face, and that stopped first when they asked me if I'm at Antifa. I go, "No, have you seen Antifa? I didn't see you here." "Well, when we noticed you were here," I go, "Yeah, yeah, I'm looking." Like, anyway, what do you need? He goes, "Well, we're Proud Boys." I said, "I know you're Keith Burwell. That's Jonathan Pearson. I named all 7 of them, and that shut that shit down real quick."
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
And,
yeah. I
and,
joke
and
that.
that's they don't like that part, you know.
No, they don't. Well, one of the funnier things about the case against them in New York, because I ended up,
Hmm.
again,
Hmm.
anonymously helping the assistant district attorney on that case. I was
Hmm.
giving him updated clips of McInnes's new show, and McInnes figured this out, and at one point turned to the camera and was like yelling at me. He assumed I was a man, which was
Hmm.
funny. He said he's talked about me without using my name, and it's been ages since he's done it, but he referred to me as like a blue haired. He couldn't accept that I look like a preppy blonde, so he like made up a persona for me
Right.
and called me like a blue hair academic at one point, which was like, "Okay, buddy, I'm not." And
Right.
but one of the funnier things about that case is they posed, the Proud Boys who just beat up some counter protesters, posed for a group photo on the Upper
Hmm.
East Side, which is one of the poshiest, most
Hmm.
expensive neighborhoods in New York. Which again, you thought you were going to get away with that in that neighborhood of New York. There was cameras everywhere, but they
Right.
posed for like a group photo, like, and that's what incriminated a bunch of them because people
Right.
immediately identified everybody in the photo. It was used against them in court. And then Sandy Backham, who is a photojournalist,
Hmm.
um,
I've actually
he
asked Sandy to come on and talk about some of her work. Great, great,
she's
incredible
amazing.
resource. Yeah.
Yeah, she chased them down as they went after the counter protesters and started beating them up. And you can hear her. She testified against them in court. He's like, if the audience doesn't know who she is, she's like, I believe late 70s, early 80s.
Yes, exactly.
And this, thin, delicate woman who's a
Badass.
senior citizen with this camera, she's total badass, was running after them. And you hear her in the footage go, "Oh no, no," and just tears, runs after them. And that, again, this tiny little senior citizen who's totally badass is testified in court, in open court, like pointing right at them, like it was like nothing. And
Wow.
I snuck down there because I wanted to talk to a journalist who was there, and I dressed up like a lawyer. I was wearing like a
Ah,
flashy suit, and because I was like, I don't want them to know if I wear this suit and I have my hair done and all that, they won't
sure.
realize who I am. So, but yeah, it was like that. The people who target the far right, and I used to be in that group, not so much now. I go after Fox propaganda, but the people who target like the
Right.
far right are a really interesting group of people. They're absolutely fearless, and they are just so dedicated to exposing that horrible movement and breaking it up. And I mean, they
Right.
it's really crazy work. And even like 4 or 5 years ago, it used to be much harder for the journalists who covered that beat to get their stuff published because the editors would get nervous and they say, "Oh, no, no,
Sure.
no, we can't. We're going to get sued. We can't do this. We can't do that." And the fact that now it's become more like, no, we realize that this is like a problem.
Post
And
Gen 6, a lot of things changed in that category.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Well, one thing that's valuable about that you did that work and that Sandy did that work, and I'll put some credit in this category since I have the archives, is they can lie about it all they want. We've got the records, we've got the lead-in information, we've got the who, what, when, where, hows. If you're lucky enough, you were there when certain things were arranged. I was there when Laura Loomer was arranging with Ellie Alexander to pull off a video they were going to do at Broward County Airport, pull out a box of empty paper and talk about ballots that they found. And they were standing right next to me with Jacob Engel, who's a Proud Boy from uh, Orlando area, who's basically a Roger Stone minion. Said, "Well, yeah, Roger sent, told me to gather some interesting folks today." And then in Miami Herald and all the other local newspapers, Stone was asked if he knew anything about it. Oh well, he did his whole deflection like he does. But I was standing there really because I look like I do. They said it right in front of me,
yeah. You
when
could
the
blend
guy,
right in.
yeah, the
Well, the
guy from
thing that
Mythbusters standing right next to you,
yeah,
you don't
yeah.
care what he's saying.
Well, and it's amazing because I don't know if our audience knows this, but the Proud
Hmm.
Boys used to be kind of besties with Roger Stone, and they would show
That's
up to
right.
events with him, and he would show up. This is well before January 6th. This is when they were still telling people and kind of getting away with it that
That's right.
they were just a drinking club and they were harmless and they weren't going to ever commit violence. And that was partly because the founder of the Proud Boys, Gavin McInnes, had been a founder of Vice Media.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and he had been kicked out at that point. He'd been kicked out for years. They got rid of him. They'd parted
Hmm.
ways. They had to pay him off to get rid of him. But because of that background, he still had clout and he still had connections in the media universe. And so he would get these kind of, ridiculous interviews where they would just,
Hmm.
"Oh, you're misunderstood." He had one, I think it was, I can't remember the network. I think it was CBS. This was after that incident at the Metropolitan Republican Club. He
Hmm.
had an incident where they had interviewed him and it was this complete softball joke interview where they were
Right.
like, "Oh, you were just, yeah, you didn't actually hurt anybody, and this was a misunderstanding." And I'm like sitting there with, thousands of clips of him saying stuff like, "We need to beat people up. We need to, we're terrorists."
Exactly.
He was just inciting violence like crazy and over and over and over again. And they had the fourth degree, which is this part of the Proud Boys where if you committed an act of crime, if you committed a crime, or you were arrested on behalf of defending the Proud Boys, you rose up in the ranks in the Proud Boys. And that was an actual thing that he promoted. And I remember when I saw that happen in real time, when he came up with this idea, and I'm capturing the show to edit it later. And he says this out loud, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" I'm like,
Right.
how the hell is that legal? Like, you're telling your followers that if they get arrested for the cause, they will rise in ranks in your organization.
Exactly.
And the arrested is usually violence. And I could not believe that that came out of his mouth. I thought, who in your right mind thought that was he used to think, and parallel with Trump, he
Right,
and Pete
right.
Hegseth, he used to think, because I see the same thing in those two idiots. He used to think that, like, he was the first person to come up with the idea of violence, like, as a political
Right.
tactic. If
Right.
we just beat people up, they'll shut up and then we'll win. And I'm like, what? No, that's totally backwards.
Yeah, and like the Father Coughlin era of the Christian mobilizers in the Christian front, when he was on the air every day calling for it, calling for it, calling for it, and then there's became a problem. He goes, "Well, I didn't mean it like a group." And
Yeah,
that's what
yeah.
sarcastic terrorists do all the time. They can basically deflect that they didn't mean. Well, I didn't mean it literally. That's on those guys, not me.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like I see the same thing with, Trump thinking like, "Oh, well, nobody thought to just go in and invade Iran before. They were wimps."
Right.
And you're like, "No, it's because it's 92 million people, and they actually have a military, and it's in the middle of this part of the world that's completely unstable all the time, and, hey, maybe there's other ways to resolve this other than war." And I saw somebody said, it was a journalist who said something to the effect of, "The reason why Trump is doing this is Bibi's wanted to do this forever, but he couldn't
Right.
get someone stupid enough to agree to it.
Right.
And now he's got Trump." It's because
Uh,
it's insane. It's an insane thing to do. And I'm sitting back just going like, like most Americans right now, just stunned and disgusted of like, what are we doing? What? And then my favorite line was Hegseth saying, "We didn't start this war, but we're going to end it." I'm like, what on earth are you talking about? We didn't start this war. We absolutely did start this war.
here in Ukraine, we would call that a Putinism.
Yes, yes, I thought it sounded very much like Putin.
It's a Putinism. So one of the things that I find interesting is when I catch some of those folks on television having to quickly, and they're really good at, like you said, there's the team they brought on a Saturday, which normally wouldn't be there. That's their black belt squad. Um,
Yes.
but you ever catch them like mid sentence suddenly having to navigate through a bullshit line that doesn't quite work?
Yes,
You see
all the
them
time.
the wrench going on inside, like, how do I, okay, land, and it doesn't land, but at least to their audience it does.
I see them try
How-
to I see them sort of catch themselves when they realize they're saying something that's not probably party line.
Right.
And they'll try to spin it like, basically, it's been a lot of this lately.
Right.
Well, I mean, I guess things could go badly in Iran, right? They could. They could, I mean, we could get a worse leader. That one keeps getting repeated. And I'm sit there going, yeah, duh. That's obvious. Like, this is a very bad, we just hit a hornet's nest. Like, this is, like, I'm no fan of the government of Iran at all. Who is,
Yeah, right.
know
Exactly.
anything about them? They're absolutely horrific. But the fact that, again, is this the way to resolve issues with them? I would say no, but because again, we could end up making it much, much worse.
It's
Um,
gonna get worse,
yeah,
unfortunately.
it's very scary. And the other thing that I kind of talked about a little bit on Substack. One person kind of didn't really understand what I was talking about, but it
Hmm.
was based off her comment. I was like, I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say here, but the thing that I find very odd is another thing that they keep repeating on Fox that's
Hmm.
very telling is they go, "Why don't they look? We've taken out their navy." I'll do my Brian Kilmeade impression. "We've taken out the navy. We've taken out the air force. We're getting the missile systems. We're knocking them out. We killed the leader. Why don't they just surrender? I don't get it." And I'm like, you're dealing with religious zealots. They're not going to surrender no matter what. I mean, they
That's
viewed
right.
the supreme leader as a godlike figure. And in some ways, like, which is scary as anything, is Pete Hegseth. I would also put in the bucket of like a religious extremist.
He's
So
Christian nationalist at its root, yeah.
yes, on our side, and that's just, I don't think Trump is. Trump's a big phony who will say anything to,
Mhm.
please his cult. But I don't think Trump is really religious at all. But
Oh,
Hegseth is. So we've got our
exactly.
version of it, but it's disturbing how they think that somehow and war in general is not rational. War in
Right.
general is never rational. It never makes sense to wage a war unless you're like defending yourself like the Ukrainians are. But
Right.
they didn't wage the war though. They're just defending themselves. But it's none of this is rational. I'm like, what are you thinking? They're going to just go, "Oh, you got us." When they literally when they literally viewed their leader as a divine, you know, peace, a connection with God. They're not going to
Well,
just
on that note, I was going to say, how often does Fox News really play? Let me back up to our audience. Um, ISIS plays off the board in an eschatological or eschatological, if you like that pronunciation, map that's really end times oriented. And we know that Christian nationalists and certain fundamentalist Christians play on again off the board. So their compass is not dictated by Monday, Wednesday, Friday, these things. It's dictated by aeons and their interpretation of Book of Revelations. And so all things are possible in that category. How much of the Fox News rhetoric plays well within that? Because that's their audience. So
no, well, it's interesting because like Nancy Einhart is probably the most overtly pro-Christian person on the network, but she's not
okay,
a crazy person that she doesn't get into like the rapture or anything, but she does talk about her faith and Jesus and she said things that are alarming. Like, well,
sure.
God is just there's my Ansel Einhart impression right there. God is just he would never harm Israel. Israel will always win in any conflict. She said stuff like that. It's like, like that's not you probably shouldn't be saying that. Um so she's made comments about Israel being sort of magical because it's God's land. She's said stuff like that. She hasn't I've never heard her make a rapture comment or anything like that. Like
Right,
nothing
right.
too crazy, but they definitely play on the theme of like, well, I just saw who was it? Oh, well, this was Bibi Netanyahu. They had a 21-minute interview with Bibi Netanyahu on Hannity on Monday, and I'm like, oh my, uh
Hmm.
and he's hard to watch and if anyone watching us talk here has seen Bibi Netanyahu in an interview, he is just will not answer a question. He
Right,
is
right.
so slick. He just like boom, 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 boom. And because he had Hannity who was just fawning all over him, Bibi
They
Netanyahu,
made him for right.
yeah, oh yeah. Bibi Netanyahu turns to the camera and he just said, "Listen, we're the good people, they're the bad people. It's good against evil." And that's how he summed it up. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of relative because they don't see it that way. They see it as they're virtuous, they're God, they're true, they're the good people, we're the bad people, we're the Satan. So it's like that kind of black and white thinking is also very dangerous with any sort of ideology.
Right.
Because the Nazis thought they were the good people. Any group you could think of thinks of themselves as doing righteous work.
ISIS rhetoric is entirely couched in the idea that you are protecting the Ummah from three different layers of people: the outright kuffar, the compromised, and the weak. And so they are trying to purify the Muslim community entirely to their version of it, and then divide and conquer between the states that are like, for instance, Saudi Arabia, that's friendly to the United States, therefore a pariah. And they're actually more interested in eliminating the gray zone than they are outright worried about the extreme, polar enemy. It's that gray zone they see as a threat. And when you see that in the same thing in Christian nationalism,
Yeah.
and you see that neo-Nazism that is in the Patriot Front crowds, they do the exact same fucking method. It's just not in Arabic.
Yeah, it's black and white thinking, us against them. It's fascism. It
Hmm.
we are all good and they are all evil.
Right.
They definitely have been pushing those themes. They're not as overt, I think, because Fox knows they have a wider audience than just the Christian nationals. And some
Right.
some Christian nationalists will watch just absolute fringe media. They won't even consume Fox. So it's
Hmm.
they're not overt, but there's themes. And when I saw BB say that last night, I just went, "Oh my of course he said that. It's Bibi
Right.
Netanyahu. That's how he talks." If they had Ben Gavir on, I'd be throwing stuff at my computer. I just can't. That man. I try to describe him to
Get the
someone.
$1 floppies. I had to do this.
Oh my goodness.
Your flip flops. They're like real cheap $1 ones. At the dollar store. I had to do that because of Ted Cruz because I didn't want to break my 60-inch high definition television.
I'm
And by
telling
having
you.
the flip flops that were spongy, I could just hurl them all day long. Everything's fine.
I was trying to
It's a real
describe.
good technique.
Yeah, I was trying to describe Ben Gavir. He's in the cabinet of Bibi Netanyahu, and he's so extreme that he briefly resigned during the ceasefire talks because he didn't want a ceasefire. And he said things as crazy as kill them all. I mean, he's just beyond. He makes Bibi Netanyahu look reasonable. And it's like, I know it's and there's so many people in Israel who don't like Bibi Netanyahu. I mean, that's why
Entirely.
it's such a tragic
Yeah.
situation. I live right next to a huge Jewish community in Brooklyn, and I would say, that's an Orthodox community. They're very pro-Israel, but even among my neighbors, there's discussion of this guy's
Absolutely.
he's too far. He's gone too far. He's too extreme. And with Jews in New York who are more reformed, there's the whole myriad of opinions about him. Many are very, very critical of him and what he's doing with Israel. Many are very critical of Israel. So this idea that lumping them all together, which I can't stand when people do that. I get very angry because
It's a bad science. It's actually bad science in the sense of trying to get things out. If you want to win a battle against good and evil and against your opponents, don't lump everyone together. Make some nuances. You will do more to peel away that middle layer. And actually, that brings me to a question about what you've seen, because you just mentioned how not everyone watches Fox. How have you seen the off ramp with like having Newsmax and the One American News? Was it OANN? How that has changed? Because years ago there was basically only Fox, and now when you have that other further fringe, the audience starts dividing. How would you tell our audience how you perceive that when it comes to tracking what
I think
Fox does with it?
Fox has gotten more radical and Fox has gotten more overtly propagandistic because they have to compete with Newsmax and OAN.
Okay.
And because they
So
have
the
to
Overton window is really pulling in that direction because of that, right? Wow.
you saw that in the documents related to the Dominion voting systems lawsuit.
Okay. Right.
There's evidence of their fear of Newsmax and OAN and how they knew they were losing market share to those much smaller networks. And they were paranoid about it, and they thought, we can't lose our audience, so we're going to go ahead and push these lies about the 2020 election that we know are lies. That is very clear in the emails and text messages and all the other stuff that came out in discovery. You can see clear evidence. That's why they settled for $787.5 million. You can see in the evidence that the lawyers were able to pull that they were, actively terrified of being destroyed by these smaller networks. So I think they've all gotten more radical. And the way I have talked about Fox is it's hard to say that they're not propaganda when about 30 people who were on-air talent at Fox, now work directly for the Trump administration.
That's right.
And then you've got all these former Trump people working on Fox, like Kayleigh McEnany and Kellyanne Conway and a bunch of others. And it's like
Pete Hegseth.
Yeah. Pete Hegseth, Sean Duffy. There's so many of them. And it's just
drunk ass Captain Pete. Yeah. Oh my God.
And it's this idea of Trump just sees people. Dr. Marty McCary was a contributor on Fox. He just sees people on Fox.
Don't you do a Janine Pirro impression?
I do one. I have to pull back a little bit from my phone because there's no way to do her quiet. But
I see.
I haven't done her in a while because she's not on Fox anymore.
I saw it in the space. Someone earlier said they would really like to see that. So that's a great one.
Okay, hold on. I gotta pull back from the phone. It's loud. There's no way to make this quiet. I'm Judge Janine. Shut up. I'm throwing this pen. I don't have a pen, so I threw a thing that I wipe my glasses with. Hello, cat. I have dogs. Did you know I had dogs? I have dogs. What is it? Stella? Doodle. Red. It's red. Red, Ted, Stella, and Doodle. There it is. Red, Ted, Stella, and Doodle. And my cat just knocked over my phone. Anyway, but yeah, that's my Judge Janine, because she yells
Right.
and she throws pens and she's like, "I love you." That's my Judge Janine.
Hysterical.
She's funny because, well, I've lived in New York for 25 years
Right.
now, and I couldn't do that accent before I moved here, but now it's like I got no problem because she's got like a really harsh accent, and then she goes up and down when she speaks.
Oh, yes.
Crazy rhythm to the way she speaks. There's a very distinctive voice. And then I
Well, the
found
way I
out,
had to figure out the Alex Jones impression was to grind glass in the back of my throat. And if
no.
you, for those who do impressions, I really didn't want to do impressions tonight, but this is inevitable, I guess. Is you have to grind glass in the back of the throat, and every impression has a hook. So
Yeah,
there's,
yeah.
anyone who's ever done impressions. I did radio for a long time, but in high school I did impressions to get out of trouble. So I had a whole slew list that the administrators knew I could do. And Alex Jones was always the lizard people and Hillary Clinton's tears. So the first thing I do is I rub Hillary Clinton's tears in my chest. And the thing is, and I can't do that for more than 10 minutes before
Yeah.
I'm out.
Same with Judge Janine. It's hard. It's a lot of energy to do her voice. And it's
Wow.
it's
You
so
get an
funny too, 'cause
aneurysm.
I have a couple other fun ones. What happened with me is I used to be a performer. Then I got my master's in journalism, got this project via a grant and all that. And when I
Mm.
first started my podcast, I had no idea what I was doing. I never took a podcast class in grad school, mainly because they were all this is so embarrassing, but they were all group classes. And it was third
Right.
semester, and I was twice the age of most of the other students. And I'd already figured out that group classes with that profound of an age difference was a bad idea because, like,
Right.
the older person's like, "Why am I doing everything, and could you please show up on time?" Like, I can't. Now, I had a group class with one of my data classes, and I had most of the people in that group were great. But we did have we had a slacker who was driving me crazy, so he just
Mm-hmm.
didn't show up. So it was one of these things where I was like, and then being Gen X with
Mm-hmm.
the bluntness and the straightforwardness was a bad combo with Gen Z. Now, not all Gen Z, but like they couldn't handle I would crush their dreams all the time. I'd be like, "You're late." And they're like, "Oh my God." And I'm like, "Okay, I can't do group classes.
I'm injured deep inside. I have to go home now.
I'm like, I can't do group classes with people this much younger than me. I can't do it." So I had never had a podcast class. And so I was sort of winging it. And my podcast is weird because it's just me and clips. There's not two people. But anyway, it works. People still listen to it. It keeps growing. But
They love it. I could see everyone here from the moment you came in. I have seen over and over and over again the crowd, like I do. They listen to you doing your work here. So you obviously did it right
Yeah,
because
but
the audience is here.
the impressions were an accident. So what happened was I sort of, since I was a child, when I quote somebody, I kind of go into their voice without
Oh,
realizing it. Like my mom has a real specific Missouri St. Louis accent. And
ah,
she's like, Julie, your father, Tam. That's my dad's name. Tam, Julie, I, I, we're going to go on Highway 44 and we're going to go do the worst when we get home. After we drive on, I hate 270. It's just scary. Anyway, that's how my mom talks. So I would just kind of do that mildly when I was quoting people. And what happened was like 3-4 weeks into the podcast, I started getting feedback of your impressions are really funny. And I was devastated because I thought I was controlling that. I thought I was holding it in. And then I was like, well, I might as well just go full throttle. And then they got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then occasionally, like once in a blue moon, somebody will go, I don't like the impressions. I just think, I don't.
That's the one that kills you.
And I go, I don't really care because you're outnumbered. Like
I
I've
know.
had, when you do something like this, you get conflicting feedback on everything.
Yeah, of
So you
course.
just have to kind of take it with a grain of salt. And one guy told me that, and I said, thanks for your feedback. I would say for your comment, I've gotten about 100 on the other
Right,
side. So
right.
I'm gonna go with the with the mob on this one rather
Well, the
than
way my Bill Clinton impression came out was what I was gutted with the person who set me in motion to do my Bill Clinton impression, because I was trying to do Pat Robertson talking about if we don't have a policy to kill Hugo Chavez, we should. Remember that? I
yeah,
don't know,
yeah.
but if I don't know if we have a policy for killing Hugo Chavez, but if we don't, we should. And someone goes, that doesn't sound like Pat Robertson at all. It sounds a little bit like Bill Clinton. I said, I
It does
can't
sound
do
like
Bill
Bill
Clinton.
Clinton.
And they go, no, but you sound like Bill Clinton. That's when, I realized that Hillary and I, especially being from Hope, Arkansas, that was a lot of places I could do that. But yeah, you don't realize what it is until someone says, well, you got that wrong.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, yeah. I
or they
just
don't like it.
I'm at a point where I don't really like one person fairly early on this a couple years ago sent me this crazy long email as if he was my like manager. And I looked at I
I
was
love those.
really specific,
I
like
love those.
just way too much, and I looked at his profile and he wasn't like in media or anything. And I thought, now who are what? And I said, I don't mean to be rude back, but I'm going to be because your email is so aggressive. I said, I can see this project from like a 30. You don't know that because I can see the analytics and I can see what's popular, what's not. I can
Right.
see what's working, what's not. And
Mhm.
I would disagree with you on that based off the feedback that I've gotten from a bunch of
That's
people. And
right.
it's a bit presumptuous to send this much detailed crazy to a total stranger. And
Must
I've
feel
also
weird that someone did that much work into something and be
yeah, it
that
was just
far off.
odd because it's like, I don't know you, and, like, yeah, it's like I have to be careful about because if you take all the feedback, your work's gonna be terrible because it's
Yeah, yeah.
gonna be conflicting, and so it's sort of like there's things that I'm, like, trying to work on all the time, but, like, there's also things that I just go, "Well, if it's not broke, don't fix it," so,
Mhm.
and so it's interesting because some of my stuff is a little unorthodox that I do, but, I tend to get good feedback on it, like, I do charts every week, and I've gotten consistently good feedback on that, consistently
Mhm.
good feedback on my word count, consistently good feedback on the fact that I include PBS articles that Fox didn't cover,
Mhm.
segments. I consistently get good feedback on that, and that's all weird, all that stuff is unusual. Most people don't do that sort of thing, so, people like my visuals. When I include visuals, I get good feedback on that. So it's like I have to kinda go with, like, well, I mean, I'm not gonna please everybody, and
Right.
occasionally, once in a blue moon, I'll get somebody who one time somebody this was the funniest. This was early on, and again, I'm lucky that I was older when I started this project and
Right.
had thicker skin, but somebody sent me this
Right.
crazy email where she said, "Ah, you have too many videos and too many podcasts," and I'm like, "That's what I do, lady. I don't know, like, you want short little
Trust me,
sort of."
I can relate when I get told, well, maybe you should try a shorter format. I go, like what? And I'm
Yeah,
waiting to hear this since I film in war. Like, what do you want me to do? Like a prisoner's story in 2 minutes because you don't have the fucking patience to
well,
listen to him for four. The
yeah, and
video that you're talking about was 4 minutes and 30 seconds. So how? Well, no, I mean like the hour long ones. Which hour long ones are you talking about? Well, this, and it goes on and on about. Did you watch the 2 minute ones that were made? There's a whole slew of. There's 35 of them right there. There's 4 minutes. Right. Yeah, there's 4 hour long ones. And that's
yeah,
the ones you watch? Yeah. So, yeah,
it's
you have to watch what
it's
the feedback is.
it's a weird. I mean, that part of it is strange, but you have to just be like, you definitely because I want to give people what they want. Like the Trump
Of
without
course.
Trump. My Trump without Trump videos came from feedback because
Mm.
what was
Okay.
happening, and those are the most popular thing I've ever done. And those are when I take out his voice and replace it with captions over his face, and then I do the
Ah,
voiceover. They're
right,
hugely
right, right. I've seen
popular.
those, right. Yeah.
And I came up with that because people said I would post Trump clips and they'd say, I know why you posted that, but I can't hear his voice. I can't hear his voice anymore." And so
I can't do yeah.
the first round of those, I put the captions at the bottom and you could see his face.
Right.
And that got because he just turned into like stills, I believe. I can't remember how I did it. I think it did stills because otherwise it would be
Yeah.
confusing that his mouth was moving. And then people said, no, no, I can't. I get that you took his voice out. Thank you for that, but I can't look at his face. So I
Right.
was like, I got it.
Keep keep going till he's not in the frame.
Yeah, so I now I put the captions, I make a very large caption, stick it over his face. I do the voiceover. I do it word for word, exactly as he said it. And those have been hugely, hugely popular. And it's to me, I like making them because it's a way of informing the public about what this lunatic is saying in a way that they can digest it, rather than, oh, I can't hear him anymore. And I get it, because before I went to J school, during his first administration, I would do the same thing. I just turned him off. I couldn't take it. Now I watch
Right.
everything he does, but which is so fun. But yeah, it's
I
that.
stopped doing impressions of him. I did one time in New York after he was elected, and then I said I'm going back to my Bush rule, which is I can't laugh at the one who's the problem, because then we're sort of laughing instead of taking action. And the guy who's hosting the club, he goes, "Can you just do the one while we're here?" And okay, what is it you want? And he wanted to do what he wanted to do was a back and forth. He would invoke who he wanted to talk to. Can we talk to Bush from it? Well, that's right. You want to sit on, distinguished citizens, male citizens, vice president changed recently. And I would switch what he wanted. He goes, let's go to Trump. I went, can we not? Can we just not yet? And now we have a lot of people who do it really well. I mean, there are some really great comedians who all over the world who switch into Trump to make fun of him. And I want to ask a question with these particular people here. What do you think? What have you learned from this audience that's really into your work? What do they want? If you go to a little bit on a meta level, what do they get out of it that you think is so valuable with the work? I mean, obviously you're informing, but with their feedback, what have you walked away with on that?
The things that I've gotten, and this is what I was trying to do, which made me feel better about it, is they say they understand their MAGA relatives better. They
Mm-hmm.
understand the loved ones in their lives that have gotten sucked into this rabbit hole. And they
Right.
say, so it literally helps them decode the garbage that comes out of their mouth. They know where
Mm-hmm.
they got it from. They understand the thought process, the fear, the paranoia, the fuel that keeps them going. It's like watching Fox
Okay.
is like taking a roller coaster into doom, and how
Mm-hmm.
that's like
Mm-hmm.
weirdly addictive for some
That's
people.
it. Yeah.
So that's the feedback that makes me keep going. And I've another one that's interesting, and this is tricky because it's like the guy who called into C-SPAN, who immediately he was so mad at the depiction of the Obamas as apes. Oh, my cats are fighting right next to that. Okay, sorry. They were
It's
fighting
okay.
literally right next. They were fighting right next to it,
This
and
is
I'm
an
like,
audience participation night.
they
Everyone
were
feel that
right
with us.
next to the phone, right next. They're both two boys. Hold on, I see. Try to get back on because I got
It's
to put my
okay.
code in. So that was hilarious because I was trying to stop him and I knocked it over myself. But
That's
hold on,
how it
hold
works.
on. I'm like,
Actually,
oh,
while you're doing that, I'll tell them about how does everyone in the
there
audience
it is.
remember the North Korean expert that while he was on television, the
Yes, he's
kids
a
watched
lovely
it?
man.
Okay. I was on the same show 1 hour before.
Oh,
And
hilarious.
I had just one of the things, and I do terrorism work, so I'm not there for the fun segments. Um, and right before I'm going around the house going, okay, hold on. Oh, the dog. And I took Sally and I gave some food outside. Oh, wait, the cat. Well, okay. And I put some food over there and I was like, okay, I think I got it covered. Okay. So what we have today is a mass terrorist. And I just kicked into mode. And then it was all right. Okay, that worked out. And then 1 hour later, that guy stole the fucking show.
Yeah, he's a lovely man. I've interacted with him a lot on
Oh,
Twitter. His kids are like, oh, they're so cute. They're so much bigger now
yeah.
too. But
So
yeah,
sometimes you got to let the cats run wild. It's a great way to get the audience to pay attention.
well, they become characters in the podcast because they constantly interrupt it. But
Right.
no, what I was going to say is that guy who called into C-SPAN because he was
Mm-hmm.
angry about the ape depiction of the Obamas in that horrible meme. And he was a great example of somebody that you could like understand and have empathy for, because he immediately trashed Trump, admitted he was
Right.
wrong, like basically said, I was an idiot, I was a fool, what I did was wrong. I don't know what I was thinking. This man is a horrible, horrible person. He does nothing but lie to us. And I was like, oh. And then some people were like, no, we still need to trash this guy. And I'm like, we have to forgive somebody like that, because if we don't, we'll never get out of this hole. We'll never get out of this hell. And
Right.
we got now, and then on the flip side, I saw another woman yesterday who's somebody that would be harder to forgive. And she was a former MAGA person who was just whining and crying and saying, "You're being mean to me." And I'm like, well, see that I feel differently about her, because she wasn't taking any responsibility. She was just like,
Right.
"Look, I voted for him 3 times, but I mean, you guys have to be nice to me and have empathy for me, or, I mean," and I was like, "Wait a second, wait a second, wait a second. You need to say, I was wrong. You need to
Right.
admit that you have hurt other people. you need to admit that your actions of helping elect this lunatic
That's right.
hurt others. So to me, it's like there has to be like a threshold of where you go, okay, so how, I mean, I hate to say
Right.
that, but there has to be a moment where you say, well, like they have to meet certain, like, again, just admit you screwed up. Uh,
Mhm.
and I said to that guy on C-SPAN, if I had a chance to talk to him, I'd say, please get some more people on this team of yours,
Mhm.
convince
Mhm.
other MAGA people. And that's another way you can make amends because
Mhm.
nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes. And I think for the casual Trump voter, for the person who didn't really realize, who was in denial that he was a
Right.
racist, who was in denial that he was a fascist, who was in denial, which I do think denial is a powerful, powerful thing. And I think
Of course it is. It's
a lot
just
of,
an embarrassment to come out and then if they met with a hostile audience, and I saw this with Pam Hemphill on Twitter, where there was a crowd that was very comforting to her, and then there was a crowd that was like, "Fuck you, you'll never come out." And I was looking at it from an off-ramp point of view. If we can't get it right with one granny, how the hell are we going to do it with thousands of people?
yeah,
We need
I
we need to
agree.
wash, rinse, repeat. Like we have way too many people be caught into one person. Have you seen this leaving MAGA guy, Rick? I caught him on interview the other night with Frank Figluzzi, and first thing he said was, "I want to apologize for the damage I've done."
See, that's where to go.
Uh, and
That's
he
how they
he
need
said
to
it in a way I
start.
went, "Okay, that's what we need to hear."
Yeah, that's exactly
Yeah,
right. And this woman that I saw yesterday on a clip on Instagram, that's not
mm.
what she was doing. And you could see why
Right,
people
right.
were reacting very negatively to her
Still the
because
victim.
she was playing the victim and making it all about herself and never once
Right.
said, like, I screwed up here. And I'm like, you have to apologize right off the bat. You have to say, I
Yeah.
made a mistake. And then and admit, because it's really hard to admit that you made a mistake. It's very difficult for people to do that. And so we
Right.
have to grant some people grace, but at the same time, yeah, you can't just get off the hook by saying, "Oh, you're being mean to me," and poor me, poor me. I was like, "Why are you talking about you?" Like, people got
Right.
deported. Like, people lost their health insurance. You need to acknowledge,
Right.
like, this guy is, and that's what I liked about the C-SPAN guy is he immediately ripped into Trump, and he's like, he's a liar, and
Yeah.
he's just he just says whatever the heck he wants, and he's just fooled so many people, and he was just like ripping, and then he called him out on the racism, and I was like, okay, well, I could work with that guy. We could have a talk. We could chat. Welcome to
Hmm.
resistance. Let's go. Rather than
Yeah.
rather than permanently like, no, you made him. You voted for that lunatic 3 times. I can't. We have to have some, or we literally will never get out of this. We'll never get out.
Right.
We'll never move forward. And I mean, I joked. I voted for Nader in 2000, and I now
I did.
pretty much immediately afterward with what happened with GW, I was so mad at myself for doing, even though I was in Illinois where there's no fear that
Well, I voted in Texas with it, and the reason why I actually don't ever apologize for it is one, it was the context of my vote. I was
I
in
get it.
Texas. I wasn't
Texas
in
is very
Florida.
different.
Yeah, and you could add all the votes over, but people didn't catch how many people I talked out of voting for Bush that were definitely not going to vote for Gore, and I got them to vote for this because we were just not thrilled with Gore. And I'll blame Gore for the same reason why I'm going to tell the Democratic Party, get your shit together this year.
Oh yeah,
Because Obama ran the 50-state campaign strategy that I said Gore should have run. I'm a big junkie of the Tour de France. I know that day 3 you fuck off, you don't get to day 21 as a winner. Day 4 you fuck off, you definitely don't get to winner on day 21. You can't fuck off, and Al Gore fucked off. And so the problem is more systemic than that. And what I always tell people is less about what happened in 2000. First off, that was stolen by the Supreme Court in Karl Rove and Florida. But less about the 2000s than what are the lessons learned? Like I despise the Green Party because they didn't do anything Nader stood for. Nader was Nader's Raider when I was a kid. That's why
yeah,
I like Ralph Nader, is that he held corporate powers into account in the 70s when I was a kid. But that's not what every person after that did. Cynthia McKinney didn't do that. Jill Stein's a Russian asset.
yeah,
So none of these other people after that were worth a fuck. But but Nader himself was actually at least had a better record of being out there, full throated on the ground, going to places in America, talking to people than Gore did. He wanted to run from the last administration. Now, thank God he came out later and had a great record with trying to confront climate change, but it's a little too late. And then they ran Kerry, which was I watched him play. Blackbird on a guitar in like Connecticut on, Road to the White House. I went, we're fucked. Holy shit. Because it's fascism 1.0. We're now fascism 10.0,
Yeah, it's
you
bad.
know?
It's bad.
And if you don't go out and play hardball with these guys, and that's actually one of the things why I'm going to be doing more of these Substacks. We had Fred Wellman's coming on tomorrow.
Oh, I love
Rick
Fred.
Wilson will come. Yeah, Fred will be on
Fred
tomorrow
is
at,
from the same. Fred's from
yeah,
Missouri, which I'm originally from
exactly.
Missouri.
Well, I'm
Uh,
from St. Joe, even though I was raised in Texas. I was born in St. Joe, Buchanan County, and it's a part of America. My dad's from Arkansas, my mom's from South Dakota, my stepdad's from Kansas. So this part of America is very important to really remember for those people who live in the coasts or the third coast. And we're going to keep platforming those voices here. And someone mentioned Rick Loges was the name of the guy who was leaving MAGA, and I want to bridge based on that. So my skill set with my family members when we get into those conflicts conversations is personal relationship. They know I've never bullshitted in my whole life. I never tell them something that isn't researched and taken care of. So that personal relationship is a big deal. How much of that do you think, in what you see in the propaganda of Fox News, is on our plate to remember as we interact with Uncle Crazy at Thanksgiving?
I want Thor to say hello because he was sitting next to
Hi,
me.
Thor.
That's the
Awesome.
little one. That's Thor. He's the crazy one. That's Thor. Okay, sorry.
All
I
good
think
attitude. No,
I
nothing to
think
start about. We like cats here.
I think one of the ways that Fox ropes people in is they do this whole they present themselves as a family and they'll call themselves
Hmm.
family and
Right.
they also uniquely more than other networks, they work their people. They pay better than any other network in the business, which is
Mm.
outrageous. And Sean Hannity gets paid reportedly $35 million a year, which is insane because most news people don't make anywhere near that.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
it's probably because he has a
Why do you think that
3-hour
they're able to
radio
pull?
show.
Where's that money coming from? Have you dug into that side? How that money comes up so much better on that network than like say I don't know the CNN network.
It's partly because Fox has a really good sweetheart deal with all the cable companies because they were like the first out of the gate. And
Okay.
they have these like ironclad contracts that are
Sure.
crazy. And they had a big dispute with YouTube TV recently. YouTube TV almost dropped them because they didn't want to pay what Fox wanted. So it might be eventually breaking up because now things have changed so much. But
Sure.
um, cable's kind of dying, as is network television. Everything's kind of dying and turning into streaming and
That's
YouTube.
because all the smart people over here at Substack.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's part of it. But Fox presents themselves. They use their same. What I was trying to say is they use the same faces, the same voices, talent across their entire platform. So
Right.
Fox
Right.
Nation, a lot of the shows were hosted by Judge Janine. You'll see, they'll just keep popping up all day long. So even if you're watching one show, you watch the morning show and then you watch the five, you'll see the same people, then you see the same people
Mm-hmm.
at night. They use the same contributors over and over and over. Like the amount of times they show Greg Jarrett or Jonathan Turley, they're legal people. They show the same medical contributors. It just becomes this repetition, and they do this whole like we're family, and then they
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
talk to their audience as if they're related, and they have that warm fuzzy thing, and then they go to diners, filled with Fox fanatics, and they act like they're just
Absolutely.
regular people. They literally act like we're just talking to regular folks here at the diner. And these are like hardcore Fox fans who got there at 5 o'clock in the morning. So that's one way they entrap people as, lonely retirees who are sitting at home who have kind
That's
of
right. That's right.
severed
The
relationships
same
or
way, the
frayed
same way
relationships.
televangelists do. And you
Yeah, it's
want
very
my
similar.
prayer cloth? If you get the prayer cloth call right now, I'm gonna give you the prayer cloth. I can feel you out there. I feel you. I feel you. I see you.
Very similar.
Barbara, that's you. Barbara, call in right now. I got your prayer cloth. Yeah.
It's very similar. And the thing from what I've read too of like how to de-radicalize somebody in these
Mm-hmm.
situations is the worst thing you could do is show them facts, figures, data, because it's not going to work. They're just going to reject it. You have to
Mm-hmm.
like slowly but surely do things like, oh, okay, you're talking about Fox again, Mom. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
We could. There's a gardening expo. You want to go to it? Do you want to?
Mm-hmm.
There's a scrapbooking, competition, or there's bowling. You want to go bowling, or you want to? there's a picnic some friends are having. I'd love you to come. You have to kind of slowly pull them away and distract them, get them on other topics, and not react, sadly, when they throw that. We all have relatives that are in this sort of, not all, I guess, but most of us have relatives that are in this kind of, you
That's right.
know, mindset, and they want to fight with you. They want to be combative, and it's so hard. It's very difficult to do, but you're supposed to, if you're trying to pull them out, not react. Just be, okay, great.
Do you have any MAGA fans? Because that's one of
I
the
have
things I'm sure you.
former MAGA
Oh,
fans. I have
okay.
people who have
But
left the movement. Yes, I know.
but
I
what
know.
I'm thinking in terms of the frenemies, they kind of go, I can't stand you, but they're watching.
I do have a lot of followers that are MAGA, and they
Yeah.
usually screw up, and then they start fighting with me, and I'm like, you
Right.
realize I'm just going to block you or mute you now, right? 'Cause
Right. But they're hooked on
like,
you. Is what I'm saying. Yeah.
I have a lot of followers who don't care. It's sort of like that Howard Stern thing of they realized that like half his audience were people who hated him, and I'm like,
Right.
I probably have that. I mean, I have people who uh, one of the things that's very interesting, like they say this about Jessica Tarloff all the time. They'll go, "She's lying," and I'm like, "And could you give me an example?" And they can't. They just, she's a liar. They need to
Right.
fire her because she lies. And I'm like, she
How
doesn't
how do you
actually
think
lie, but okay.
how do you think they precede sort of a layer of bullshit in their followers' minds so that when they interact with you or our family members, that they walk in and what we do is we actually complete the circuit. We do the thing that they say we will do. Because this is a propaganda technique. If anyone's ever studied magic, or mentalism, but I don't really do mentalism, but magic, it has the same phenomenon. I know what your predilection will be. Therefore, I'm going to set it up so that you arrive on the other end to complete the circuit with me. And I think that there's something in the right wing movement that does that when lefties come at them. They go, see, exactly what I thought you would do.
Well, the thing that's very strange that I can always tell when somebody watches a lot of Fox.
Hmm.
Because and this was very funny to me because they act like I
Hmm.
work for CNN, and I don't work for CNN. I don't really have an opinion about CNN, but they'll go, "Well, CNN," and I'm like, You're
I love
saying
that. Right.
CNN to an independent journalist. Do you realize
Right.
I don't work for CNN?"
Right.
And they'll go, "CNN does this and that, and CNN and CNN," and I go, "Okay, let's stop. Number one, I don't work for CNN. I don't care about CNN. Why we talk about CNN? You're
Right.
talking
Right.
about CNN because Fox attacks CNN on a regular
Right.
basis."
The Butt
Um,
Obama phenomenon.
yeah, and you can kind of tell from the way they phrase things and the way they attack you.
Mm.
It's like watching Fox. It's the same exact talking points, it's the same exact angle. And I'm just like, I try to be very polite with people when they come at me because I don't see the point in screaming at them because it's all day long. And so I'll write in my usually I'll write "Have a nice day" or
Hmm.
"Cheers" at the
Hmm.
end of whatever I wrote. 'Cause I'm like, I don't really care. Like, I'm not gonna get in a fight with a total stranger on the internet over something. My favorite was one I did snap the other day at somebody who said, "What do you mean we're fighting a war with Iran again?" And I'm like, "You forgot 8 months ago? Yes, that's a
Right.
war, and it's called the 12-day war. It's called the Israel-Iran war. Yes, it's a war. Yes, we were involved. What?"
Yeah. Here we suddenly go, oh, you can intercept drones. Well, that's a fucking amazing thing. Let's watch this. They're going to intercept drones now that they're over there. Okay. Oh, they're going to intercept rockets now. Because for the listeners who don't know, if you just tuned in, I'm actually broadcasting from Kyiv, where I've been here the entirety of the full scale war, and we watch this stuff, and we actually see the propaganda in America from here. Things are broadcast here about Ukraine, commentary about Ukraine on Fox and Newsmaxy. But that whole interception campaign, we went, really? So now we're going to close the skies? Okay, and we're actually seeing it again this week. There's reactions here to what's happening in the Middle East that are really, yeah. Well, we know where there's a war. If you'd like to come be part of a fucking war, so yeah, it's very frustrating.
Yeah, they're trying to scare everybody right now as if they're acting like Iran could have hit us, like, with a ICBM. They actually used the term ICBM the other day, and I'm like,
They
"No,
did, yeah.
it's like a rocket. They'd have to have a rocket," and they need a silo for that ICBM, and that's that's hardcore.
Who dropped that one out there?
I can't remember. I know Bibi implied it, and then somebody else. I think it was one of their many former. They've had just a retinue of former military on it.
Oh yes,
experts.
yes, that's exactly.
That's what they do. They just one right after the other, and it wasn't Jack Keane. General Jack Keane is one of the more reasonable ones, but it was some former military person, and he used the term ICBM, and I'm like, that is incredibly advanced technology for a country like Iran to possess, and it would take you can't just get the nuclear warhead. You got to put it on something.
That's right.
And then right now they have ballistic missiles, and they can fire missiles relatively close to their country, but your ICBM is you need a silo that goes into the ground, and you need a huge. That's my understanding, at least, a huge rocket that.
I wrote a post 2 days ago, or I guess it came out yesterday, but here on Substack, I pretty much publish everything here. I also publish at Kyiv Post, but I published a piece here that was talking about the comparatives between the arsenal that we were facing with Iraq in 2003 and what we're facing now. And it's a very different type of arsenal because you have cyber hackers and information fronts that Iraq didn't have. But the Shahed drones that fly over my apartment and fly over my neighborhood to kill people, they are now made in Russia, but Iran definitely has a cluster of them. But they also have an asymmetric way of applying them, and you're seeing it in the Middle East now, where positions that were not defended have already been hit. And I think that one of the things I've said in the last few days is America is not prepared for the type of drone warfare that Iran is ready to throw at them. And it won't necessarily be at the home front for a while. It doesn't have to be at the home front. If they fisher off the United States from its partners in the Middle East, create enough discord in the Middle East like they're already doing right now, and then if you remember that, speaking of Proud Boys earlier, you remember we had the Florida bit in 2000 when the mails went in October. I used to know the date. A mail went out and says, "Well, we know how you vote," to people. And it was pretending to be Proud Boys, but it was in fact Iranian hackers and disinformation artists. So they know that very well, and they are far more sophisticated at it than the Iraqis would have ever been at the time. But that drone warfare is going to be a big part that the United States is not ready for. And I've been watching the drone warfare here develop at pretty much both sides of the battle. I have friends who basically make all the type of gear that you see that will be what America's facing. And as you see, the president here is now going to the Middle East with interceptor drones and say, we have options, but what they want is packed missiles in response to deal with the interceptions we have. So America, for the fear that the audience has in Fox News, a little bit of it is there. I mean, it's a real thing that now. What I'm curious to see, and I'd love to see over time how you monitor what they come up with, is as the shit hits the fan and the FAFO kicks in, what does their rhetoric do? Because they're not going to be able to stay in control of this like they did during the Bush administration.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It's a whole different fight.
I mean, what they've done with Ukraine is they talked about Ukraine a lot and at first, and then they started splitting, and some people on Fox were like, who cares about Ukraine? We need to pull out of Ukraine.
Right.
We're wasting money. And then some people on Fox were like, we got to defend Ukraine. That was wild to watch. It definitely was a schism. And then when they finally fired Tucker Carlson, that kind of removed some of the anti-Ukraine voice on the network. Although it's still there, but they pretty much just ignore Ukraine, and they only talk about Ukraine in terms of peace talks with Trump as like a victory. They did the same thing with Israel Hamas, that conflict. They talked about it a lot at first, and then when it got too depressing to cover, basically, they just stopped covering it. And they would only sometimes give the Israeli point of view. Usually they wouldn't talk about it at all. One of the more egregious times they did that was when there were massive protests in Israel against their own government. Massive, like hundreds of thousands of people out in the street protesting Bibi and his administration. And Fox showed like 200 people. And I'm watching it on PBS. Yeah, it was bad. And then I'm watching it on PBS. And PBS showed the real protests, and they were showing like drone shots of like this massive crowd filling the streets of Tel Aviv. And I would go, this is two totally different realities,
Right.
and PBS included longer segments on it, more detail. It was clear it was a much bigger protest, and then Fox dedicated like 5 minutes to it and showed like 200 random people off to the side, and I'm like,
Right.
oh my, like that's what was. So that's how Fox spins things they don't like, including warfare. Including warfare, they're trying to manipulate their audience to support one
Well,
way or the
that
other.
brings up a really good question
Ignore it.
because, I don't know if you know who Don McClellan is in our audience, but Don McClellan is one of the best war photographers of our last century. And at the end of his career, he worked with Sunday Times when Rupert Murdoch took over, and he wanted to go cover the Falkland Islands after having covered other wars and being again he's at the top 0.1%. And Rupert Murdoch's like, I have appliances to sell, and this doesn't help us sell those. So, do you see that phenomenon still running the show here, where ultimately that's sort of what's behind that is, we don't want to make anyone really uncomfortable.
Yeah, they also get feedback from their audience. Like they
Okay.
were ignoring Epstein forever.
Huh.
When Trump
I wonder
decided,
why.
yeah, when Trump decided he didn't want to talk about like Epstein was just over, like this in the summer, they stopped talking about Epstein completely.
Mhm.
And then when it got back in the news cycle and 3 million documents were released and it picked up again.
Mhm.
One week, Jesse Waters with Kennedy, that host who's simply known by one name, Kennedy, were making fun of
I
it.
remember for her from MTV, if we're old
Yeah.
enough to remember that. Yeah.
And she had made a quip about, Jesse Waters said he needs a fixer. Epstein was just a fixer for rich people. It was just a fixer for rich people, kind of downplaying it. And then she said,
Hmm.
yeah, he'd get him penicillin. Ha, ha, ha. And then the next week, like on a dime, they suddenly had
Hmm.
longer segments on Epstein, although they were all about Prince Andrew and Clinton. So it was like they got the message of like, you went too far by saying penicillin. Because I think people are still upset about Epstein, even though they don't want to accept that Trump may have had like a role there. They don't want to accept that, but they
Hmm.
still don't view it as like a lighthearted, no big deal, like they were trying to make it into. So that one was interesting. Another one was this was so silly because I've talked about this numerous times on my podcast. They tried to make fun of Biden for using a CPAP machine. And within
Right.
48 hours, they had segments like, ha ha ha, look at the marks on his face, CPAP loser. He's an old man. And within 48 hours, they had Dr. Mark Siegel going, CPAP machines save lives and they're wonderful. And I'm like, people complained. That's totally what happened. Because who's their audience? It's a bunch of old
That's a
people.
great question, though. Is where is the line that they can't travel? And a few years ago on Twitter Spaces, some of the people who are here in the space from my audience over there, or our audience over there, they would say, "Well, what do we do?" And I said, "Well, suing the fuck out of them. Eh, ask Seth Rich family, ask Dominion," and I ran down the cases that are kind of modern, no less, where they basically were taken to court and there were consequences, and that's like the ultimate way that it happens. But also, there's this side you're referring to where people in the audience are affected, like, oh, whoa, 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 hey, wait a minute, I have that condition.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, check your
I
shit.
saw that was a dramatic turn that that was the first time I saw them really react to their audience, although they didn't admit it online.
Sure, right.
They didn't admit it on air, but you could tell something had, because the first segment where they were making fun of the CPAP machine, I thought, who do you think watches your programs? Like,
Hmm.
like the primary user of a CPAP machine is like an elderly man. That's your audience. What are you doing? And then I thought that seems dumb. And then within,
Hmm.
like I said, 48 hours, they completely changed their tone. Um, I also, in the past 6 months or so, I've seen them lay off Joe Biden because I think they realized nobody cares and it wasn't getting good ratings and people just didn't want to see them
Right.
bash Biden. And
Hmm.
when I would post clips of them mocking Biden, the feedback that I would get was overwhelmingly like, what is wrong with them? He's retired. He's an old man. Let him enjoy ice
Hmm.
cream. Let him enjoy his family. Because they would make fun
Hmm.
of him for literally buying ice cream. Like, they would make fun of him for
Hmm.
anything. And the comments would be so angry of my people would be so angry. And I thought, I can't imagine the Fox audience cares anymore. Like they don't that stuff they dropped. They let that go. So I have a feeling with this war, they're going to probably, right now they're going to, every other segment is this war. And within, depending on how long the stretches out, depending on how it goes, they're probably going to just downplay it and drop it like they do. And it's weird because it's like, how can you, like, ignoring the Israel-Hamas war as long as they did was just baffling, that they would just never mention it. And then they'd be, all of a sudden they're like, oh, Iran's firing missiles at Israel. Well, we can't imagine why. And I'm like, you haven't talked about this war for months. You barely mentioned it for months. And now you act like it stopped or something. I mean, it's profound what they do, how they ignore stuff. So,
well, yeah, the comparatives, like some people, I think, and people should do this, is if you were to weigh at the same hourly block per day, so you have your 6 to 8, your 8 to noon till 5, like you're about to go do your 5 p.m. thing. You have these blocks of time that have different audiences, and you can compare what the three major cable news networks are doing, and Fox routinely just disappears.
yeah, just does its
It's
own
a
thing.
whole other black hole of whatever. I was asked if this is a clutch shirt. Absolutely, it's clutch shirt.
Nice.
Psychic warfare is real.
No, when
So
the Epstein survivors did their press conference, Fox ignored it. That big one that they
exactly,
did. Yeah,
that's
they didn't
exactly it.
air it.
Right.
That's what they do. They just,
Wow.
which I have a feeling they're going to do the same thing. And again, like they showed a poll this morning on Fox and Friends where they said, well, it's about evenly split. And I'm like, that's a favorable poll where 50% of Americans support this. I'm like, they do now. Give it a week, give it a
Right.
month. You know how anything in the Middle East with our military, even if it starts off mildly popular, tends to go straight down. And so I'm like, I cannot imagine that if this is not and how is it resolved? Nobody knows. But if this is not resolved incredibly quickly, they're
Hmm.
not going to just. It's 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 kind of amazing. Like Trump is taking people's health insurance away. He's taking SNAP away. He's
Yeah.
starting wars in the Middle East. Like he's doing almost
Driving up the prices of the groceries talked about
yeah,
when he didn't even know the word groceries.
yeah,
Groceries is an interesting word. Groceries. I didn't know the word
old
groceries.
fashioned. It's
I'm
like,
keeping
how
my
are you?
lightweight version of Trump. I can't do his voice.
I just do the whole
I
nobody's
can, but
nobody's ever seen anything like it. Nobody's. He says that so often that it like twitch. It's
yeah,
like
I call him
something
Captain
nobody's ever seen
Superfluous.
before.
My nickname for him is Captain Superfluous because that's the word that he's doing. And I have an article I may do out tomorrow. I've got it started. I take 2 or 3 days to really do some of these that are not the deep dives, but they're like my impulse thoughts, which is he referred to Zelensky as P.T. Barnum. And if there's anyone in fucking office right now
He
than
is P.T.
P.T. Barnum,
Barnum.
it's Donald J. Trump.
That's the only thing he's got. I've said it before. I said he's dumb as bricks. He gets confused. He
Yeah.
meanders. The only skill that man has is he knows how to sell. He's P.T. Barnum. That's it. That's all he's got.
Yeah,
And
and
it's
P.T. Barnum used the same superfluous language over and over. The greatest this, the biggest that, no one's ever seen, and Trump uses it like punctuation.
well, and my ex-husband was an actual circus clown, so I know
Mm,
way too much. That's true. That's not a joke. I know way too much about P.T. Barnum. Way too much.
yeah,
Like he
sure,
came up with the term jumbo. He came up with the term rain check. He invented the press conference. Like we
that's
could
right.
go on and on and on. He was the master of manipulating the press. He was the
That's my
master
article. It's coming any
this
day
way to
now.
this way to the egress, all that fun stuff. It was all this. P.T. Barnum was all about. He was a master showman. He was a master salesman, and he didn't do anything that evil. Like
Right,
he's
right.
not
He
like
wasn't. At least he wasn't that guy. But
he
yeah.
wasn't a fascist trying to take over the world and like I
Mm,
Rachel Maddow described Trump the other day as like a 19th century kind of robber baron trying to steal wealth from all these countries,
right.
which is kind of how he's acting, like Greenland
Well,
and
yeah, on day one of his new term, there was a briefing here in Kyiv, and a former Ministry of Defense guy was here, older guy in his 70s, and he was doing this whole, well, I think things will be different because there's been frustration at the last, and uh, I'm gonna call it the era of the last administration because I think it's really not the administration's fault when 51% of Republicans voted against helping Ukraine. Um, but someone says, but he's a businessman there, therefore, hey, and I'm in the audience as a journalist like this, and all the handlers, all the people who run the media center, they know me really well. They go, "Oh, this will be interesting. The American has something to say." I go, "Well, I have a PhD in Trump, Russia, so this is gonna be fucking fun." So he finishes, and finally he comes my way. Добрий день, мене звати Christopher. Мене питання про Trump. Він не businessman. Він ніколи не сказав правду. Like I basically told him, like he's not a businessman. He never speaks the truth. Why are you calling him a businessman? He can't negotiate. He doesn't finish the negotiation. What did he get out of North Korea? And I just shot this guy down politely, not aimed at him, but just shot out every concept of what they just said about Trump to say there's only one thing he does. He pitches. There is no close. There is no
Yeah.
sale. It's a pitch, a pitch, a pitch, a pitch, a pitch, a pitch, walk away. A pitch, walk away. And at the end, the older guy, he wasn't really happy because he got kind of politely called. But all the other age groups came up and said, thank you. Like
True.
you called it. You just said he's not. Wow. And they too had thought it was a businessman, but they thought it was like heartless businessman or something. No, the guy is not a businessman. I'm a businessman. My dad was a businessman. Here's a product. Here's a customer. Here's a close, and we have to wash, rinse, repeat. We have to keep doing it so that the goddamn business stays open. If I sell too low, or I sell too high, there's no business. If I don't have a product in the end, there's no business. You got to have a business to have a business. Otherwise, you have a pitch.
Yeah,
And they
and
go,
Trump said failure. Trump said failure after failure after failure after failure
yeah,
after failure. My
that's it.
favorite failure is Trump's shuttle because it was a plane that he bought that was just going to go from like Boston, New York, DC, really short flights. And he had the stupid idea of buying this entire operation, this plane that already this airline that already did this little shuttle thing. When again, there's a very comfortable train that also goes to those same spots. That in some ways is easier because to go through all the hassle of an airport to be up in the air for like 30 minutes and then come back, these are very close cities. So it doesn't really make sense to fly to them. But
Right,
he bought this airline that was already kind of
right.
failing. And his stupid idea was to make them luxurious planes. And he put like gold plating in the bathrooms and made the flight attendants wear pearls. And he thought, if I make it a luxurious experience, I'm like, they're in the air for like 30 minutes, dum dum. Like you don't know your customer, you don't know what you're selling.
Right,
He did the same pattern that he's done over and over and over again with all his failures. Is he just thinks, I'll buy this, I'll throw money at it, like his
right.
casinos, and then he doesn't make the money back. He overspends.
Well, I know you're watching Fox, but are you on his mailing list?
I get stuff from him and a bunch of other people because
Okay,
I
I'm
pay
on
for
his
Fox
mailing list,
Nation.
and I'm going to tell the naked out which account it is. It's actually the account's listed under Roger Stone. So I get, hey, Roger, you're not with me today. Oh, I love getting the hey, Roger emails. I get them every day. I sometimes get 2 or 3. You didn't answer my call.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. I
now
get the
I don't know. And
surveys.
it's just a
Answer the
whole bunch of
survey.
different things. You're going to be audited, and it's the weirdest set of pitches. It's an absolutely bizarre. I mean, I would love to get a psychologist to go through these hundreds of mails that I've collected from that account because I have just one account that its only task is to collect those notifications. And I would love a psychologist to sit down and say, I don't know who writes this, but what I see is a deteriorating syphilitic man that has a lot of problems
Yeah.
because they're
Yeah,
really messed up messages.
I mean, just yesterday he said his dad was from Germany. His dad was born in Germany. His dad was born in New York City. So
Mm-hmm.
his grandfather was born in Germany, but his father
Right.
was born in New York City. And you're like, how do you get that wrong? Like, my dad was born in St. Louis, Missouri. Like, I know my dad wasn't
Well,
born in Germany, even though my family's German. So that's like, that
yeah.
was just like floored me. I was like, what did you just say? He just said that like it was nothing. Like, I have a fondness for Germany because my dad was born there. And people are like, no, he wasn't. Like, what? Your dad spoke English. Your dad grew up in New York City. He, grew up in great wealth, all of that. That was just like, yeah, his brain is going fast. And that's
Mm.
the thing that's also very disturbing about him. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm better. People say, "Oh, is he going to run again?" I go, "Will he survive this term? I don't know."
I just can't imagine doing it.
Such good
Let me
health.
get to it. I know you got to get to your 5 thing. I'm going to say
Yes,
a couple things
never
here,
ends.
which is one, it never doesn't. I wrote you voted for this. It's yours a couple of days ago, and I'm gonna write to PT Barnum. Let's talk about who the real PT Barnum is. But I wrote one today, and it was about you. How did I do? Did I do okay on you?
I probably didn't see it yet because I,
Okay, good. You're busy. But I
I,
wanted I
I
for those
never
who
stop
didn't pay
working.
attention, for those who
I,
haven't paid attention to your work, maybe, and I know a lot of these people have, so that's great.
yeah. Oh
But
no,
I
you
I
sent me
wanted,
the
yeah,
link. You sent me the link, and I was like, literally, getting ready to set this up, and I didn't have a chance
yeah,
to read
yeah,
it. That's my life. I am flying by the seat of my pants all the time. That's one thing that's very frustrating for me as a person running a media project is people say to me all the time, um, they
yeah,
go, "Oh, I get the one note I get more than anything is some form of more." And whatever, to some form of, I want more of this, I want more of
hmm
that. And I just think I am working to the point of breaking every single day. And I was behind schedule. That's why I didn't read that yet. And I apologize for that, but I
yeah.
just had no
You don't
I
have
had
to apologize. No,
no
I
attempt.
think
I was still
my
going
point was
through
my point
Fox
was
and Friends.
well earned. It's well earned. It's to say that having done, and I showed you that I sent you a photo of my 2,500 tape collection. I've done this what you're doing before. And 10 years ago in 2010, I did a regular show about torture and all the stuff the Bush administration did. But I was on regularly had someone from Media Matters join me to go through the regular bullshit fest that was happening. And I gave them basically a chance to come in and say, "Hey, Jess Levin, so what was in the news this week?" And we would recap. And so what you're doing is invaluable to everyone. And I want to encourage everyone who is watching, if you aren't subscribed, subscribe to her account, but also do the paid part, even if it's $5, so that it adds up, because that makes pressure for someone that's doing the independent work a lot easier.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I think like this weekend, to give an example of how crazy my life has been, I was
Mhm.
already behind schedule. And because of the war, I added 8 hours of Fox and Friends, 4 on Saturday, 4 on Sunday, and then three
Oh,
additional, because they added it at the last minute, three
right.
additional primetime hours. So that was on top of what I was already behind on. So that's why I'm
Trust me.
out of my mind right now. And
Well,
I
I have
hope
raw
to get my
footage from
podcast done today.
2021. I have raw footage from 2021 I was recording before I came to the war. I have not edited, and when I need spare room and I have about 2 gigs left on a drive, I go, "What is that? Oh, I have this," and it's like March through August 2021, and it takes a while to cut those segments out. And what I do is I cut them A block, B block, A block, B block, etc., so that I can say what I want. There's other stuff I don't really cover, so I don't need it. And it takes time. It really takes time
It
to
does. It's
encode,
hard.
to track it, to keep track of which hard drives it's on. It's a lot of fucking work, and I know
Yeah,
what you're doing, and
the crazy
that's why
system here.
kudos from me to you and the great work you're doing. You'll come back because we're gonna have crazy season all year long. You'll come back to
Yeah.
this again.
Yes. Well, to figure out when I have time.
Yes,
I
Rosalina.
scheduled this one before the war started. And
Yes.
it's so funny because I was like, oh my God, I got that thing on Wednesday. And I'm like, it's
We'll
going to
always
be
make it
okay.
work for both people. We'll make it work for both. And I will say to our audience, we'll have Fred Wellman will be on tomorrow.
Love Fred.
It's going to be 11 p.m. Central, noon time East Coast, and then I'm going to keep doing this for Americans because like I talk about Ukraine a lot from here, but all of the people here know that from 10,000 miles away, I still have a sense of responsibility for my information knowledge, propaganda, background knowledge, and extremist knowledge to keep obligating. And we'll have, for instance, some of the Capitol guards are my friends, so we're going to have them on, Sergeant Goodnell, Daniel, and Harry, and those guys. We keep track, and we're not going to drop the receipts. Proud Boys, you're fucked. We're not going to forget. You know. You did the work. You're not going to forget what you covered, and I'm not going to let it go.
No.
And we're digital people, and digital shit lives for a long fucking time, don't it?
Yeah. And it doesn't happen often, but occasionally still people will ask me for an old Proud Boy clip. And I'm like, here you go. I can find anything.
Yeah, exactly.
My
It's
stuff
really
is so
super.
psychotically organized. And this is totally a side note, but
Please.
uh, McGinnis would always talk about how white people. I hate. He's so racist, but he'd always be like, "White people are good at systems. White people are good at systems." And I'm like, And he would always trash women, call women lazy, and he'd say women are stupid, women are lazy, women aren't organized. And I'm sitting there with a highly detailed spreadsheet on every single show he's ever done, going, really? Really? What are we? And I'm like, are we good at systems? What am I doing over here? It's just very funny because I'm like and the other joke, I made this joke years ago when I was still covering him, right after I outed myself and went public with it. He used to say that estrogen made women stupid and lazy. And I'm like a workaholic I wouldn't call myself, I have plenty of things I would say about myself. I wouldn't put myself in the stupid bucket, but whatever. It's all relative, but it's always somebody smarter, always somebody smarter, always somebody that you're like, wow, what? Like you meet somebody and you're just like, I can't even comprehend. You're like a physicist? What? Like, of course. But he was saying like women are stupid, women are lazy, and it's estrogen that makes them. And I used to produce naturally, probably not anymore, but I used to produce like double the amount of estrogen naturally for women, which is a weird, they call it estrogen dominant. They don't know why, but they were like, oh, your estrogen levels are off the charts. And I'm like, I'm superwoman over here. Woo! Not lazy or stupid, you loser. Anyway, I just always thought that was funny. I'm like, little does he know. Anyway.
Well, you probably go neurotic when it comes to that gap because if you don't, something gets missed.
Yeah. I'm like borderline OCD over here with with how I organize everything.
You'll relate to this line when I have people say, "Well, no one covered no one covered what?" And they would mention something. I say, "No," and I could almost top of my head go, "No, that got at least 8 hours on MSNBC, 5 hours on CNN." Now, wait, what are you watching though? Maybe it's what you're watching is why you didn't think it got covered, but it was covered. How do I know? Well, I have a hard drive here that's got that.
Anthony Davis once described me as he has the weekend show and he does, or the Sunday show. I don't want to get his show wrong, the Sunday show. And then he works with Midas Touch and he has his own, he's an independent person like us. And he said, he's British. He's like, your brain is like a Rolodex. You like remember all these clips. It's my bad British accent. But he's like, you've got this Rolodex brain. And I'm like, and he's Gen X. So I'm like, that's a Gen X reference, sir. The kids don't know what a Rolodex is. But anyway, that was funny.
That's what I described how I decided to pull up Substack is that because we had Brian Karim on, we have Frank Figluzzi on, we've had John Fugelsang on.
Love John.
Basically, it's my Rolodex. We're going to have Mark Zaid on Friday. So it's basically my Rolodex. Friends I've been very honored to know over the many years of doing both media work, counterterrorism work, and basically being an active citizen who pays attention to shit. Obsessively. Too much.
Fabulous. Yes, I have to get back to watching because the 5's coming on. Whoa.
Go do your 5.
I'm not religious, but I do this anyway. I was raised Catholic. It's still
there you go. And thank you for being here and thank our audience. And again, don't forget to not only subscribe, but consider a payment to the $5 thing.
We'll see you Patreon. Soon. It's all good.
Patreon. That's right. If it's a good platform for you, go for it. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks so much.
See ya. Cheers.
Thank you.
All right. So while she goes away, let me tell you a couple things we've got going, which is we're not deviating too far from this. Tomorrow again at noontime East Coast. Now I'm in Ukraine, so I keep having to do the math, and I want to apologize to those who heard we were starting at 11 today because I can't do fucking math sometimes. I have friends in